We've explored the 2024 NFL draft from just about every angle, except for one, and that's what I would do. That's what we're doing here today, a 7-round Miami Dolphins What Would I Do mock draft on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It's your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts here on the Locked On Network. We don't just say it, we live it. It is your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase on last-minute tickets. Lowest prices guaranteed. We are tapping in the ESPN 2024 mock draft simulator to do a 7-round What Would I Do mock draft for the Dolphins. And this is a really great opportunity, I think, to kind of sew together all of the concepts and theories and economics of the draft that we have been talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and in some cases, months. This is the exercise. I've put together a personalized 2024 Miami Dolphins draft board that has 200 names on it, right? I have put together an expansive list of showing the work of individual players and where I think they stand and how they would fit for the Dolphins. I've talked about how this Dolphins draft board that I've put together, it doesn't read strictly up and down or left and right. I know there was some people who are maybe new to Touchdown Miami or new to my work who saw the board, and I made the mistake of putting the 1 through 200 board. That's the last time that'll happen in the same post as the horizontal big board. And the horizontal big board, again, it does not adjust for injuries. It does not adjust for positional value. It does not adjust for age. It does not adjust for players that you have under contract. It's just strictly an illustration of fit within the scheme or perceived fit within the scheme based on my assessment of the players. So you can look at it and you could see where a player who plays a devalued position is ranked higher than an offensive lineman. But the theory is to take all those players, see the visualization of it, and work within the upper tier of best available talent and either have a process of elimination that eliminates them from consideration that pick, in which you would cascade down into the next tier of best available talent. Or if you don't have a disqualifier, you would then in turn select that player out of the tier of best available that makes the most sense for the team. And we're going to apply that here with this mock draft. So if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to pull up the ESPN mock draft simulator for 2024. And the reason why we're using ESPN, what I like about ESPN is it puts you in conflict more often than some of the other boards that exist out there, or in some of the other simulators that exist out there, where you get to your pick and it's very clear and obvious, oh, this player fell into my lap. This one doesn't necessarily always do that, particularly after the first round. And I appreciate the challenge that presents, because I don't think sometimes it is as easy as, oh, so-and-so fell, grab him, no questions asked. But many times it's not that simple. And we're going to run a first round. I'm through the first 18 picks of a simulation. Wanted to make sure that you don't get a totally crazy board break. And it looks that we're going to have a simulation in which we're going to be able to run a hypothetical 7-round mock draft. And I will apply my horizontal big board to the players and talent that is available. And we'll do a what would I do based on the grades that I have provided. So Miami comes on the board on 21 in this simulation we're using. And if you're not watching on YouTube, it's no worries. We're going to talk through some of the players here and make a decision. The best available talent available for the Dolphins is Leatu Latu. Olu Fashanu fell to the Dolphins pick at 21. Amarius Mims, Chop Robinson, Johnny Newton, Cooper DeJean. These are the best players that are available. Of the tiers that I have, the tier 3 talent on the horizontal draft board, which we went over yesterday, you can find it and download it over on Touchdown Miami on Substack. Johnny Newton and Leatu Latu are the two players that are in the tier by themselves. Johnny Newton has the M, the dreaded M next to his name. It's a medical tag. Leatu Latu has the dreaded M next to his name. It's a medical tag. Cooper DeJean has the dreaded M next to his name, a medical tag. All three of these players have individual medical concerns that the Dolphins are going to know whether or not it's a disqualifying factor for them. We can only speculate. We can only try to speak from a place of intelligence. And what I can tell you about Leatu Latu is he was healthy through the pre-draft process. The concern there is he's had a spinal fusion procedure. Does a second one would hypothetically be a career-ending injury? What's the runway for that to happen? Impossible to know. Cooper DeJean had a season-ending lower body injury. Johnny Newton played with a Jones fracture in his foot. The concern with a Jones fracture, there's a high incidence of re-injury. That's why it sounds like he's sliding a little bit out of the first round. And then the other player, just strictly off of the horizontal board, that's like a definitive first-round grade that I have that's available, is Peyton Wilson, the linebacker. But as I said yesterday, those medicals are so bad, like that's off the board, off the table entirely as far as in discussion for the first 2 rounds of the draft, as far as just the risk that's incurred. In theory, I could look at this and say, well, I have Mims, who also has the dreaded M next to his name. He's only started 8 games. He had a lower body injury, and then he tweaked a lower body issue in the pre-draft process. Fashanu, Latu, DeJean. I could get cute here, right? I could get cute, and I could try to move down a few spots and try to finesse an extra pick. But what I don't have a lot of confidence in is any of the teams immediately behind Miami trying to jump one another for picks. Maybe Dallas with Olu Fashanu would want to come up and make that pick, but then you're going down from 21 to 24 and moving behind both Philadelphia and the Chargers. The Chargers are a potential offensive line spot. The Eagles are a potential offensive line or pass rush spot. I would still be guaranteed to get one. I do think the injury reincidence rate predictively for Johnny Newton is enough of a tag that it's probably going to disqualify him for this conversation. But Leatu Latu played. He is a tier 3 player. He's a definitive first-round grade for me. He played with the injury the past 2 seasons. Premium position. The Dolphins have a need there. I'm going to make Leatu Latu the pick at number 21 in the what would I do simulation. Now, I have thoughts on what I would like to do with the next pick, which comes up at number 21, at 55 after picking at 21. This is the spot where, depending on how the board breaks, I would really love to finesse a move here to get, even if it's not a 3, pick up a 4, have a little extra wiggle room, potentially be able to package two picks together in a 2025 pick and come up into the 3rd round if I felt like there was a player that was available that was sliding that I wanted to make a splash and go get. But again, the board has to break a certain kind of way. And what I would not do is move out of at 55 if there's a talent that feels too good to be true at that spot. I would not move out of it unless, again, there was a surplus of players that I felt like I could move back and zhuzh my way down the board a little bit and guarantee I would still get one of those, wow, I can't believe this collection of talent for migrating for the Dolphins is still there. We're going to explore that next, day 2, here on Locked On Dolphins, so make sure that you stick with us. Getting tickets to your favorite sporting events is not supposed to be stressful. You're supposed to be fired up about going to the game. With Game Time, it's never been easier to get tickets for Major League Baseball, as Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace for the MLB. which makes getting tickets even faster and easier than before. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to first pitch, and with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. I love the fact that you can, with just a few taps on your phone, see the view from your seat. You can see the all-in pricing, so there's no surprises when you put the tickets in your cart and go to check out. You could save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today for last-minute tickets with the lowest prices guaranteed. So I'm going to kick this simulator back up for those of you who are following along on the YouTube channel. We have the board up for as it fell to 55. Taking a quick peek at who came off the board directly in front of us. There's Peyton Wilson going to the Rams at 52. Other players of particular note, not too much. I think that at least looking at the middle of the second round, there's not a lot of players where there's a lot of sweat off my back that came off. Maybe Chris Jenkins, Zach Frazier went 42. Jackson Powers Johnson goes 39. That's a pretty Xavier Leggett 33. This looks like a pretty favorable board break for Miami. So if I look at best available players, I can already identify there's a name here in the first few, and it's pretty Ricky Pearsall, who's still on the board at 55. That's a really attractive option for me because I had a late 1, early 2 on Ricky Pearsall. He's still here in the middle of the second round at 55. I also have a late 1, early 2. It's leaning early 2 on Trey Benson based off positional value. But again, running back, that's not a need for Miami. So there's a disqualifier here. The positional value and the need disqualifies him, even though he's in the same grading tier. He's not in the conversation that I'm going to have about who I'm going to consider picking here at number 55. Javon Bullard, the safety, I have a late 1, early 2 on. That is another player who jumps off the screen at me as somebody who I have graded favorably. If I get into just the early 2s, that's where you see the name Michael Hall, I think is in the conversation. Christian Haynes, the guard from UConn, is still on the board. Roman Wilson at wide receiver as well, so I have some flexibility. Cooper Beebe's graded in the same area. Mike Sandersill is a late 2. Not that that's necessarily a position that I'm looking to run up, but I look at this and I do feel there's a little bit of talent that's available. But what I would not want to do is I don't want to get greedy. And I've done this in simulations in the past, and it's been a painful reminder to me. Don't jump too far down when you want to get a feel for how the board breaks. For example, if I'm willing to bypass Pearsall, if I want to draft for need here, I can incrementally kind of work my way down, and I could say, okay, let the board be dictated. I have 2 players that I have coveted very similarly along the offensive line in Christian Haynes and Cooper Beebe. If I want to strictly get the best player available, I have 2 players I have in consideration between Pearsall and Javon Bullard that are available as well. So if I'm Miami and I were to move down, Tampa picks at 57. They have 89, 92, 125, 220, 246. To move down 2 spots, I could probably get 125 as a 4th-round pick. Yes. And the Cowboys and Bucks took Roger Rosengarten and Keon Coleman. So neither of the 2 scenarios that I have seen any movement, which is nice for me. I could, in theory, look to move down again, go another 2 spots. Houston has 59. I'm now picking at 57, and I picked up 125 in the trade back with Tampa. This is what the Jaguars did in the first round of last year's draft. They moved back 1 spot, picked up an incremental piece, then moved back 2 spots, picked up another incremental piece with a mid-round draft pick. And that was in the process of getting to drafting Anton Harrison. That was part of the process that saw the Bills land Dalton Kincaid. Can I move from 57 to 59 and get one? I'll get 127. I won't get greedy from Houston. I just got 125 from Tampa. Yeah, it happened again. And Houston goes Junior Colson. Green Bay goes Troy Franklin. So I've moved down now 4 spots and 2 incremental trade backs, picked up a couple of 4th-round picks. None of the players have come off the board. So I like that quite a bit. I was hoping for a little bit more clarity, and we don't want to sit here and just trade back two spots every day. I'm now at pick 59, picking in front of Buffalo. Ricky Pearsall still here. He's the highest graded player I have. It is a position of need for Miami. I would really love to get an offensive lineman, but maybe I can rub those 2 4th-round picks and a future 3 together, and I can find my way in position to draft one. So I'm going to pick Ricky Pearsall here. I've moved down twice, still best player available. It's a position of need for Miami. I think he's an outstanding scheme fit. It prevents you from spending significant money in free agency, which you're looking at hypothetically with Odell Beckham Jr. So I'll make Pearsall the pick. So as this pick processes and it gets ready to start the simulation, I'm going to look to pause this and try to jump back up with the picks that I facilitated in moving down incrementally and see if I can parlay that into a bigger move to get myself a day 2 pick when it's all said and done. So pause the draft. We've seen Haynes came off the board at 65. Suamataia went 67 to the Commanders. BB just went 70 to the Giants. Did I get boned here? I might have got screwed. Let's see. Interior offensive line, Zach Zinter is still available. Who I have Christian Mahogany is still available. I don't have the highest grade on Mahogany. Patrick Jones, Blake Fisher, who I have an early 4 on. Let me see. Who's got some, the Bears are scarce on picks. Would I be able to trade with the Bears and come back up? Like, this is I would love to have a strategic plan. Okay, so I could theoretically, at least in this simulation, take 125, 127, and a future 3, knowing that you're getting a compensatory 3 for Christian Wilkins, and I can come back up to 75 and be on the board again in 2 picks. That should put me in a position to draft an offensive lineman. Patrick Paul came off the board to the Falcons. That's no sweat because I need an interior guy. So take your pick here. Don't let the run get away from you, whether you want Blake Fisher or whether you want Amagaje from Yale. I'm going to pick the guy that I have the 3 on, which is Zach Zinter, and just make sure that I don't let the run get away from me and be proactive. If you like Christian Mahogany more than Zach Zinter, just flip the names. I don't really care, right? But in theory, that would be my ideal day 2 strategy. And you've seen teams that have been able to do this where they can kind of cherry pick their way down the board and then have a reaction when a run starts. And the key for Miami is to assemble the draft capital to prevent the run from getting away from them. That's what I would love to see the team do. And that's kind of my strategy coming in for what I would hypothetically do in their shoes. Now, of course, in real life, there needs to be more willingness from the opposing team to make a deal. If you didn't have the willingness, I think they would have to have a very honest conversation in the draft room about who do we have in free agency on the interior offensive line? Is it Dalton Risner? Is it somebody else? You've seen a couple of those guys come off the board. Let's have an honest conversation about who the other starter is going to be. I don't think you could just say, well, we'll figure it out. I think you need to have contingencies in place. This is something of a contingency that I'm glad I was in position to be proactive and react to with the pick of being able to move down, pick up the 4s, and then move the 4s to get into the 3rd with the future 3 is kind of the hallmark piece of that. And that's similar to, if I had to think of a historical draft trade, the Panthers, when they came up and got the Ole Miss, Matt Corral, the Ole Miss quarterback. They gave a future 3 and a day 3 pick to pull out of thin air and come up and get Matt Corral from the Patriots. So that's a historical example of a deal that we just facilitated here in the simulation. We're going to get into day 3 and recap this draft class that I've been able to put together. In this hypothetical, in a perfect world, I'd have been able to hit pause fast enough for the simulation to come up and try to get BB or to get Christian Haynes, who are players that I had graded a tier up from Zach Zinter. But I do think Zinter is a good enough scheme fit for Michigan. There's power there. There is athleticism there. I think he's fairly clean in protection. I'm not mad about that being the choice that I end up landing in the 3rd round anyway. But in a perfect world, my pause button would have been faster than what it was. We'll get to day 3 here in just a minute. Make sure you stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to weigh on you in life. It's important to let those things out, especially to someone who is unbiased in your life. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us would love the opportunity to have someone to offload onto and get those things that weigh on us off our chest. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. The playoffs are here for the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That is $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The number one thing I was terrified coming into this mock on a simulation was not going offensive line in the first 2 picks and then getting the door shut on me. So I can take a collective sigh of relief to know that I have somebody who I feel like can be a significant contributor to the squad. And I think would be a starter at guard, exclusively at guard for you. And you got it in the 3rd round, so you didn't compromise early positional value. You kind of transitioned to drafting for need after your first 2 picks, where I think you really got surplus value with Latu, who has a top 10 player in the class. You got a 21, and Pearsall has a top 30 in the player in the class, graded specifically for the Dolphins. I kicked down twice and still got that player in front of Buffalo at 60. Like how that board broke quite a bit. And then I get Zach Zinter. So now the Dolphins are back on the clock. Let's go ahead. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, we'll bring the simulator back up. It's at pick 158. This is one of Miami's organic picks. The Dolphins with their picks thus far, again, Leatu Latu, Ricky Pearsall, Zach Zinter. 4 more picks to go here on day 3. I will take a look and see how the board fell, knowing that I picked wide receiver, knowing that I picked offensive lineman. I do need another edge. I don't really love the talent that fell. It's like Cedric Johnson from Ole Miss, Gabe Hall from Baylor, Trajan Jeff Coates from Arkansas, Miles Cole from Texas Tech. I don't see anything there that's really going to spur me to move. If I look at safety, I don't really see a lot of talent here, whether it's Bo Braid or Jalen Simpson or Evan Williams, to spur me to move in that direction either. If I look at interior defensive line, Fabian Lovett from Florida State pops as a 2-down kind of run plug type of player. But tight end's where it's at. I have Jared Wiley from TCU sitting on the board here in the 5th round. I have him graded as a 3rd round player for the Dolphins. So that's kind of an egregious at this stage of the game best player available. It happens to fit an area where Miami does continue to have developmental upside opportunities. This is a 6'6" former quarterback who's shown really good receiving chops. I think he's a better in-space blocker right now than Jatavian Sanders is. Catch radius is good. I'm taking Jared Wiley from TCU with the pick at 158. And maybe that's not a starter, but again, you're outside the top 150. I think expectations minus reality equals disappointment. Picking a 158, it's hard to be mad about the developmental upside of Jared Wiley. Now, if you told me I come back and I get Fabian Lovett here at 190 or 184 and he's still on the board, I won't think twice about that one. I think that is an early down and short yardage snap taker who's really good in run defense. There's just not pass rushing value, and that's why a player like that is still available. Isaac Garendo, now at 198, kind of pops as a potential best player available at running back. I know it's not the biggest need, but a 220-pound running back who can run in the 4.3s and has low tread on the tires is going to be hard to ignore. Don't really see any special teams guys in the secondary. If I look back at the edge group, still have some similar guys that were available the last time around who are sitting here waiting to get their names called. If I looked back at the offensive line again, I don't really see any names that get me excited. So I think I will go with Isaac Garendo, who I know I have a 4th-round grade on. This is in the 6th round at 198, as a different athletic dynamic in that running back room, which is just going to leave us the 1 pick left in the 7th round. And then we can recap this draft class based off of how the board breaks. We'll be interested to see if there's any developmental type guys that I'd really be excited about. But in reality, this is a player at 241. Expectations to make the roster are probably going to be pretty slim. Trajan Jeffcoat, wow, he's still here. And I know the Dolphins had a visit with him. I'm kind of inclined to take Jeffcoat just because I know he's a heavy-handed player. I'm familiar with him from the scouting work that I did with him over the past couple of years regionally with Draft Network before I left there last March. And the Dolphins are probably going to have 53-man roster early season availability for more than one edge rusher. So if you got Latu as a pass rush guy, Jeffcoat's a little bit more of a low ceiling pass rusher, but heavy hands, can reduce over top of tackles. I'll take Jeffcoat because I actually think he has a decent chance to make the roster, at least to start the season. And especially now that there's been some changes with the 53-man cutdowns that allow you to put 2 players on injured reserve at the start of the season and not have to have them on the active 53 and cut other players. You can have 2 players on IR and then designate them to return without having to cut other players to start the season. They count as against your 8 designations for the season. But if Miami needs to tap into that, I think there's a decent chance they would have other spots open. So what I'm hoping for as I review is, and what I like about the ESPN simulator when you get to the end, is they give you a summary of, based off the rankings, how likely the players are to be available at your next pick. And this is what I really like about what happened on day 3 in this simulation specifically. Laiatu Latu had a 39% chance of being available with the pick at 21. He was available. We picked him. He would have had a less than 5% chance of being available with my next pick. So obviously didn't reach on the player. That would infer good value selected at a premium position for the Dolphins. Ricky Pearsall, less than 50% chance that he was going to be available at pick 59. Again, that infers good value. By the time my next pick came up at 75, he would have had a 14% chance of making it into the 16 spots. That, again, infers good value for a position of need and a really good scheme fit in my mind. Zinter had an 87% chance of being available at 75. That is in large part because I went above and beyond to go and get Zach Zinter before the run completely locked me out of what I felt was a starting offensive lineman. He had a less than 5% chance of making it down to 158. I would have loved to have known where that percentage would have fallen if I had kept 122 or 125 and 127. But I don't get those numbers. Jared Wiley in the 5th round. Seems like this is the first player that they felt, or at least the simulation based off of the data that it uses to run, would have felt I would have had a player that probably would have been back around the next time around. Fabian Lovett, same story. Pretty good chance he would have been on the board at 98 versus 184. But again, you're in the day 3 picks. You're either picking to address needs directly, as Chris Greer illustrated, or you're taking developmental players like an Isaac Garendo, who was the pick at 198. So this draft class, the What Would I Do draft, stuck in pick at 21, Laiatu Latu, traded down twice, incrementally picked up a couple extra day 3 picks to pick Ricky Pearsall, the wide receiver, at 59. in this simulation based on the board break. Then proactively go up and get an offensive lineman before the run locks me out with Zach Zinter. That was in the 3rd round. Tight end Jared Wiley in the 5th round. Interior defensive lineman Fabian Lovett in the 6th round. Running back Isaac Arendo in the 6th round. And then edge Trajan Jeffcoat with pick 241 in the 7th round. That is my what would I do draft class based explicitly off of a simulation and the way the board fell. If I did this simulation again, I'd probably not have Latu available, and I'd have different names to pick from at 21. I probably would not have Pearsall available. But if you're just going to give me that scenario, that's how I'm going to apply all the theories we've talked about for months. This is how I value positional value. This is how I value reading the horizontal board and the tiers of talent as they're available and identifying disqualifiers to take players out of the conversation. This is how I value extra picks. This is how I value drafting for need. This is how I make a pure value selection at 59, but then make sure I come back and have the ability to fill the need on the roster after I get past the first few picks, where just getting good football players is the most important central theme. Take it for what it's worth. I'm sure there's some of you out there that are plenty happy that I'm not running the draft on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and that's okay. I gave it my best shot with this individual simulation, not knowing the way the board was going to fall, and that's why we love the simulators in general. I'm Kyle Krabs. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. We will be back again tomorrow as we continue to get you ready for the 2024 NFL Draft.